adhesive bandage.
The book is called 150 Years of Obamacare by Daniel E. Dawes. Daniel, you make the point about November.
Correct.
And so people are saying, well, you know, I vote for various reasons. Why should this be at the center or number one on the list of why they should vote?
So we have gone through 10 brushes with death. This ACA has experienced 10 brushes with death. And the November election actually could be the 11th brush with death and the most fatal for this law. And that's why it's so important, because we know that the Supreme Court now has made it clear that in order to dismantle this law, you have to do so through the political process. And this November is really that last opportunity for them to do so. That's why it's so critical.
It's really a matter when it comes down to it. I mean, you notice you call it Obamacare.
Yes.
You talk about how it took. It's really the ACA, right?
Yes.
The Affordable Care Act.
Right.
Do you think that under any other name, or under any other president, this would have been a successful endeavor that would not have been challenged to the extent that it has been?
I think it would have still been contentious, but not as contentious had it not been Obama that passed.
So why, for people looking on, why are they so angry about the Affordable Care Act? What is it about it that the employers and different corporations have such an issue with?
Mm-hmm. So, you know, during the reform negotiations, opponents of this law were spending 7 to 1 what proponents could to get the truth out about the law. After it passed, they were spending 15 to 1 to really bring it down. Mm-hmm. And I think the issue with the stakeholders, with different industry, is this is a $3 trillion industry, mm-hmm. and yes, the law is the most sweeping healthcare law. It's impacting, you know, their bottom lines, right? But it's there too. There are provisions in there to reduce the cost of care across the board, mm-hmm. and there are certain groups that don't like that.
Mm-hmm. In regards to your book, I want to know if someone reads your book who is opposed to the ACA, what will they learn from it? What kind of takeaways, 1 or 2 takeaways, would they get from the book to maybe change their, not change their view, but maybe enlighten their view on the ACA?
Great question, and I'll tell you that I think when they look at this book, they're going to recognize that it wasn't just one man, it wasn't just one administration, one Congress that passes, it was generations of health equity champions who were pushing and spent decades of their lives trying to get this done. That is what I want folks to get. And the other piece of that is, you mentioned opioids and whites dying younger. Mental health is a huge issue. When President Obama says we've been trying this for 100 years, I'm actually saying the book that's not necessarily so. You're only focusing on the health insurance reforms. We've been trying to do this for 150 years when you include the independent campaigns around mental health reform, minority health reform, and then the universal health. So that is absolutely critical. If we had passed mental health reform 150 years ago, they passed it in Congress, but the president refused to sign it then. And then President Carter had to wait 125 years to get that done. And then we know Reagan came in 2 months later, dismantled or tried to repeal when he got into office. So if we had those mental health reforms, which are now included in Obamacare, can you imagine how much further we would be in terms of mental health, behavioral health equity?
And what our community would look like.
That's exactly right. Exactly. We wouldn't have this Jim Crow healthcare system in prison.
Now, Daniel, I want to bring in a little Afrofuturism here, right? Let's say 150 Afrofuturism. Afrofuturism. It's my comic book thing. Here we go.
You might have an afro in the future.
So let's jump ahead to 150 years from now, because I've always thought whether you look at Europe, you look at Asia, healthcare is pretty much becoming standard.
Yes.
So if we jump ahead 50 years, if we jump ahead 100 years, what kind of basis will all future healthcare be looking at? Because I don't think this is going to change. I don't even think, in all honesty, if a Republican got into office, we've already seen this happen. They can't repeal this because too many people like it. They can't repeal all parts of it. What does this look like in 50 years? What would be standard healthcare for an American in 2070 or 2080 based on what we're accepting now?
Real quick.
Sure. So I believe that you're going to see, you're right, the cost issue is something that we've got to tackle. I think you'll see a lot of progress in moving forward with increasing access and coverage, but I think it's that quality piece that we have to work on the cost.
150 Years of Obamacare by Daniel E. Dawes. Daniel, we appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.